Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie Ferraresso, and with me, as always, Jack Clabby, a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA, in Tampa, and Pablo Torres, a senior cloud security engineer at Second Watch. On the podcast today, we'll chat with Serges Jorgensen, the founding partner and CTO of the Sylint Group. Sometimes described as a James Bond-type cybersecurity expert, Serges has provided response and remediation guidance to multi-billion-dollar international espionage and cybersecurity attacks. He also provides strategic direction and active oversight in computer security, incident response, and counter cyber warfare. Serges, we look forward to a great conversation. But first, hello to my co-hosts, Jack and Pablo. Gentlemen, hello.
Ernie, great to be here today. Pablo, how are you?
I am doing quite swell, living the dream.
Every day.
That's it, right? We get to do this. We do what you like. You don't work a day in your life.
That's right.
We had it's an email earlier going around about this new study that Proofpoint released, which is fascinating for a number of reasons, but it's about using journalist Twitter and email accounts as a vector of compromise, and then sort of exploring why journalists in particular are targets for hackers, both to compromise and impersonate, or to compromise and sort of take data from. So it's worth reading its entirety because of the overlap between the sort of technical aspects of the hack and also the social aspects of the hack. There's a few aspects to it, but really the nation state actors were trying to, one way they were doing is they're just creating sort of reporter personas on social media and then using that to reach out. There's a lot of different news media that are out there now. And so you're not familiar with the name of every one of them. And often reporters are on deadline. And so if you pretend to be a newspaper reporter without hacking anyone, you can often get folks in academia or policy experts to talk to you because they think they're talking to a legitimate journalist. Additionally, there's actual hacking, probably the most common, I think, from the report, was hacking of these journalist email accounts directly. So these journalists are used to, why does this succeed? These journalists are used to talking to people using fake email accounts, anonymous sources. They're used to working on deadline, so they work in a speedy way, and they're used to trying to seek exclusive access. And so for a social engineering fraud, a journalist who's working under these constraints can be a good target. Then when the bad guy's into, let's say, an email account, they can poke around and see all sorts of goodies from anonymous sources, from aggregations and news sources. The thing I liked the best about it, though, was that one of the more successful hacks was to pretend to be Twitter and tell these journalists, somebody logged in from Moscow, right? And of course, the journalist, it's like, oh no, if my Twitter goes down, I'm done, right? This is how I get the word out about myself. So that was an exploit there. Journalists, like high-powered journalists who are subject to this, are smart people, discerning people using a lot of critical thinking, but even they are going to fall for a hack like that because they think, right? If your Twitter account get hacked, that's like me not having access to Coke Zero. It's like
you can't do it.
The sine qua non, as the French say. I think
Ernie. That is how that.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this report?
I think it's really. It's from just like, I'll call it a TTP. There's like nothing new with it in the sense, but it's going after new people, and it's taking advantage of, like you're saying, Jack. It's that putting that sense of urgency in order to gain access, and then once they're in there, it's just a unique. It's something new and different, because they're going in for different reasons, right? Yeah, to find out who they're. Just think about it. If you're working that anonymous source, and now especially if you're a person in getting information on one of these nation states, whether Russia or China. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the Chinese security apparatus is going to be interested in finding out who the source is on these human rights violations.
I thought the North Korean vector was great too, because a lot of the hacking that the North Korean government is reported to have done is just vengeance, because someone does something that offends their leader, and then the state-sponsored hackers go after the journalists just to like get
just cause exactly.
But the way the phishing email that went after the journalists was a job opportunity.
Of course.
So hey, we've got a job opportunity for someone with exactly your, if you do it very targeted, it seems benign. And then they dropped all sorts of awful payloads that made for a very tough day.
I want to say we were talking about it a couple of episodes ago, how the North Koreans were, it may have been a legitimate job offer, because they were taking on work in other places posting on the outside from North Korea. So that may be that. Who knows? That could have been a legit thing. We're looking for people to do work.
I thought even the other day everybody gets these phishing campaigns that appear to be targeted to, their profession. So I got one the other day that was like, I'll give you X amount for an hour of your time. I just need you to weigh in on something. And I saw it. I was like, psh, that's clearly phishing. Report, delete, move on. And then I'm talking to one of my colleagues, and he's like, yeah, got a couple grand the other day, just an hour or two of work. I was like, oh, you responded to that? It was legitimate? Oh, come on.
No, say it ain't so.
I was like, are you kidding me? So it was pretty funny, but I would rather pass on 100 opportunities than fall. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'd rather pass on 2 than fall for 1. But maybe not pass on 100 and fall for 1. But it is funny
for one.
Yeah,
falling for 1 is just one too many. And not to cut you off, Jack. You just sparking all this thought with what you and Ernie are both sharing. On the previous government network that I was on, I mean, we dealt with this extensively. And I mean, the amount of endpoints that were on this network, we would see phishing attacks and campaigns on the regular. It was daily. Before I go down this rabbit hole, I want to say that Proofpoint has a very strong software and just platform and just overall infrastructure that allows for security professionals to really get into the weeds, to look into where the origin of all of this information is coming from. But they get creative with the emails, right? They get creative with the messaging. They get creative with the wording and the way that the language and the communication barrier is breached. Most importantly, they're really trying to play on your emotions. When they're trying to socially engineer you, they want to get you to say, oh, wow, I should certainly participate in this. Oh, wow, what an opportunity. Oh, wow, this would be great. Think about the possibilities down the road. Great, I got you to click. Next thing, you find out that you clicked on a link that is going to redirect you to some credential harvesting site that's going to go ahead and take your Office 365 credentials, and then someone's going to be able to impersonate you and get onto whatever network that they were targeting. That becomes a problem, especially if you're a VIP within a critical infrastructure, and you're someone who's a key stakeholder who holds the keys, to just say it quite figuratively, to the entire kingdom. That's scary. And what we've seen is that these identified campaigns have leveraged a variety of techniques, from using web beacons, which are super noisy and I think they're super lame, for reconnaissance, to send, they've been using the web beacons for reconnaissance, or they're sending malware to establish initial access within a target's network. I don't know. APT is focusing on media. It makes sense to me. I mean, there's a lot of rich information there, and some people aren't as cyber savvy as they claim to be, and that's okay. I mean, it's only a matter of time. It's not if, but when.
And there's no way you can tell, because these are just Outlook. One of the examples is pretty good in there, and it's the Iranian example, where it's just, Metro newspaper. They just, hi, I'm a senior reporter of the Metro newspaper, and I'd like to set up a time to talk to you. It's a benign email. There's no link in it. Mm-hmm. And it's just an Outlook email address that they've provided. And there's no way you could tell if it comes in, if this is legitimate or not. You just, oh, it's an Outlook email address. Like, maybe I know that newspaper doesn't use Outlook, but maybe the person's on a train or something. So it's a real person. It's not automated, right? It's a proper targeted phishing technique with human intelligence as what they want to gather. But you're right. I mean, at the end, the goal is to, like a spy, you're creating a relationship that at a later date they're going to exploit. It might be exploit to harvest credentials and check out what's in the email. It might be exploiting it for purposes of, softer forms of communication, such as influencing the research direction. But it's an example of how sometimes you can just lie, and people believe you.
Yeah. And this one goes out there to all of our security leaders who follow the podcast, and all of the respective engineers and investigators who listen. But I really do want to put emphasis on focusing on DKIM and DMARC. So DKIM would be your domain keys within identified mail, and that protocol allows an organization to take responsibility for the messages that are being transmitted. And then DMARC would be domain-based messages and authentication reporting, and that's just going to help you have good control and governance on like how information is going through the wire and authenticating emails. So yeah, make sure that works. And Proofpoint does a very good job at that. They do good jobs at inspecting DKIM and DMARC, and they also work based off of IPs and geolocations. So it's pretty neat. They update their signatures frequently, so they're going to have relevant information when it comes to advanced persistent threats going on a campaign.
That's helpful. I feel like you hit DMARC with that advice, Pablo.
Nice. Thank you, Jack.
And well played, Jack. Well played. And with that said, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to talk to Serge about his role in responding to nation state and organized crime attacks against critical infrastructure. Stick around.
Looking for more no password required content? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at No Password Pod.
All right, welcome back. Our guest is Serge Jorgensen, the founding partner and chief technology officer at the Sylint Group. You've got a storied background, of all over doing some pretty, I'll call it in the military parlance, some high speed, low drag type stuff. How did you get started in that?
So I've always been interested in technology and grew up piecing together systems and programming and playing with computers. After high school, getting into electrical engineering, and went through college as an electrical engineer, and came out and really started looking around for something that would tie all of that together. Started working on some intelligent design, autonomous vehicles. It was artificial intelligence at the time, but it was still a long way away. So from that point, started trying to figure out how I could apply my knowledge and background to different fields, and settled on cybersecurity as something that was evolving at the time. And then I was a professional sailor at the time as well. From that point, started into Sylint.
Do you find any parallels between the interest in professional sailing and then in the interest in cybersecurity, or are they different parts of your brain that are operating when you're doing those two things?
Both are very much about solving problems. And I think one of the things that makes me and makes Sylint successful from the cybersecurity side is keeping it real, keeping it actionable. I can tell you about sailing theory all day long, but when you're surfing down the back of a 25-foot wave in the middle of the Atlantic at 2:00 in the morning, theory's out the window. It's got to be actionable. Apply it right now. And same thing when you're dealing with an ongoing nation state attack against critical infrastructure. You don't have time to go back and assess, okay, where's the book on NIST compliance and what should we be doing? It's very much about how do I contain the scenario, contain the situation, and start responding.
We sometimes talk to folks who come out of like a accounting background and get into cybersecurity, or programmers who get into cybersecurity. But you came from the electrical engineering, sort of the like hardware side of things. Does that give you a different perspective, do you think, compared to others in the field?
I think so, very much. It tends to, again, be very applied, and also understanding how things work from a technology perspective has always served us well in figuring out the evolution of cyber, and understanding that whole concept of security by design starts with the systems, and starts with whether it's electrical impulses or whatever. Interesting also I mentioned some of that autonomous vehicle. So certainly I've done a lot of coding over the years and a lot of application development, and blending those two together really helps with the understanding of cybersecurity.
So when you talk about machine learning, that's kind of a buzzword nowadays, right? And machine learning, it's going to save us all. I'd just be interested. You've been in in this space for a long time. You've seen where it's come from. You see where it is. What's the real story behind it? Are we talking? Is Elon Musk right that the Terminators are going to take over in the next 5 years, or is it something a little bit Siri's going to be still in your pocket in 5 years, something along those lines?
I don't know if it's going to save us all or kill us all, but certainly it will be interesting. The application of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we're starting to get there of people really not being able to tell the difference between that machine that's learning or guessing and that intelligence that's actually applying thought to, or applying a very, very large algorithm to a problem. And so what's the difference between a human that's really been learning over 20 years and takes 20 years of experience and applies that to a problem, and a computer that is learning over a long period of time and applying that? I think so far, one of the big distinctions is that all of those systems do well when they're applied to one particular thing. But good luck getting your Tesla to figure out how to solve a cybersecurity problem. Yeah. And good luck having your cybersecurity AI tool or whatever figure out how to drive a car. So when we can't correlate experiences like that, then the solutions are always going to be limited. So from a perspective of, will we have a Terminator and will come kill us? I think everything's going to be very point driven. There are some questions right now when you look at from a warfighter perspective and you introduce artificial intelligence or machine learning in there. US is still pretty firm about having a human in the mix and having that, okay, I give you the authority to fire at this target that you're showing me. But other countries aren't necessarily following that line. And so we may see some interesting weapon systems and technologies like that. It has changed over the years. When I was looking at machine learning and artificial intelligence in the 90s, we just didn't have the processor power or the memory capacity to really build it out and develop it. Now all of that stuff has shrunk significantly, so it's becoming more and more practical and more functional.
Along those same lines, you just got me thinking about that. You mentioned processor power. So I know a lot of people talk about, the impact of quantum computing, and so what if you bring those two together? Is that going to be the sound barrier moment when those two technologies come together?
Yeah, it's Sneakers, right? Was that old movie where they had?
That's right. That's right.
I think as computers are getting faster and faster, it's certainly providing new opportunities for both protection and, unfortunately, offensive actions as well. Yeah. Let's look for a moment at proxy shell, exchange proxy shell, which was an issue, zero-day attack a couple of years ago, and it provided unauthenticated access to mail servers. Mm-hmm. So if you had a mail server that was facing the internet, somebody didn't need usernames and passwords, get right in, and basically could dump the mail off of that mail server. From a threat perspective, a lot of organized crime victims, we saw organized crime would get in there and use that to launch ransomware or whatever. We saw some nation state activity where very focused and directed attacks of Chinese, Russians getting into embassies and different targets, different agencies that they would go after. But we did see something really interesting. And certainly if you extend the concept and make some connections, it can be scary. And that is that there was a lot of interest by the Chinese in a lot of different systems. Why would the Chinese threat actors be logging into or attacking small business exchange servers? But when you cross that against the Chinese having, I guess now the second fastest or the second largest AI, big fight going on, who's the best. But when you cross that with the Chinese having one of the largest AI solutions in the world, if you then take all of the mail from all of the systems that were vulnerable to proxy shell and push that into a massive machine learning indexing system and just ask it to start making connections, you have a massive intelligence collection opportunity. And that, yeah, could start changing the world. Privacy starts to go out the window. Emails that you wrote 10 years ago on a mail system that you've since deprecated, but the original, the recipient still had that sitting around, could now be ingested into some massive search engine so that if you jaywalk in China and their AI engine does facial recognition, it's now possible to tie all that together and go, wait a minute, that's Ernie who sent out this email, who was associated with this contract.
Well, I can only imagine, especially seeing how they have all my data because of thanks to the Office of Personnel Management. Yeah. They graciously handed that over to them. No, it is. I think we're in an interesting point in time, because that's where I think you're right on. Is all this data is being taken and stored, and now you're going to be able to move through it, make those connections at incredible rates of speed that you wouldn't have been able to do before. And that's what I think
there's supposed to be some sort of international, I don't know if relationships where they control this, right? But like, what's that? Can you talk about that connection between global markets, trade relations and sanctions and cybersecurity, where it's working or where it's maybe not working for things like this?
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, is that we recently saw the Conti ransomware group when Russia decided to invade Ukraine. Conti came out pretty strong and said, hey, we're aligned with Russia. And if you attack Russia, or if you are adverse to Russia, then we're going to come after you from a ransomware perspective. The Ukrainians dumped a bunch of email and correspondence from Conti that pretty much showed that there was a more than friendly relationship between the organized crime group Conti and the Russian intelligence agencies. So I think there's other countries have connections that the US press would just be all over, or the US government has laws to prevent collaboration between commercial and government interests. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think other countries around the world either don't have those laws or actively promote those connections, whether from an organized crime perspective or from an intelligence agency to research company perspectives. So absolutely, from a global market perspective, we see collaboration. One of the first newsworthy items, I guess, in 2011, there was the Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan was fighting off a hostile takeover. And all of a sudden, the law firms associated with that takeover attempt and that buyout started getting attacked by Chinese actors. Wow. And the thought was that they were going after inside information to try to get ahead of that hostile takeover and figure out how to make it happen. Certainly something that we've seen over the years, certainly as early as the last few months, where trade negotiations might be going on, levying trade sanctions, and we see an uptick in nation state actor attacks against either the government agency or the industry leaders that would be involved in those trade sanctions. where they're trying to collect information.
It is like, to bring a sailing metaphor back into it, I mean, it's like privateers versus pirates. If the government of Russia is making deals with private criminal actor groups, they're not going to get arrested in Russia. To turn it to like the US side for a little bit, but to continue that sort of organized crime metaphor, if like a large retailer has like a data breach in the US, and then a lot of personal data gets collected by the bad guys and sold, the person who then purchases that stolen information, makes a bunch of fraudulent purchases. But where is US law doing the right? You think doing the efficient thing there? I mean, you've got the hacker, then the person who buys the fenced goods and then uses it to commit the fraud. Are we punishing the right people, you think, with the current regime that we have?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And I think, Jack, if you extend that further and say, not only are we punishing the victim potentially, but are we not punishing the person that allows the transaction to occur? And if your pawn shop concept there, somebody steals something, pawns it, sells it, and ultimately the original owner gets punished. We are seeing something like that right now with museums, that they're getting art yanked back, and they said, hey, you never should have bought this art in the first place because you didn't do your investigation, your provenance on the artwork, and you should have known that this art was stolen or needs to be repatriated. I don't know if the museums are being refunded for the purchase price or the money that they paid, but if they aren't, then that should serve as a warning for them of, before you spend millions of dollars on a piece of art, make sure that it's not stolen. And but if we extend that to the same concept of if a Nigerian prince walked into a bank and said, hey, I need to open up an account for Ernie. And they said, okay, sure, no problem, here you go. And they just did this magic twirl and they said, hey, I need to open up an account for Jack. The bank, the person at the front desk could look at him and say, wait a minute,
that's crazy.
Something's wrong here. But online, somehow we let them do that.
Can you just kind of just talk a little bit about how the payment card industry and the card issuers sort of police themselves?
Yeah, I think they recognized in the late 90s, early 2000s, that they were going to have to get better at this themselves. And I think the reason why is because they're really playing with their own money. When you go to a store and buy something on your credit card, the store gets paid on that within a couple of days, and the credit card user then gets the bill in 30 days and looks at the bill and goes, I'm not paying that. That's $400 lawnmower at Home Depot. That's not me. So the credit card user was never really out that money because they would just refuse to pay. But that meant the credit card companies all of a sudden, and the banks had to be better at detecting the fraud. Otherwise, they were out the $400 because Home Depot has already gotten their $400. So they were the kind of the ones on the hook. And because of that, they've spent billions of dollars and a lot of time and energy. And now even the advertisements for the cards are often about the security of the card. So now you go online and you say, hey, you should use Discover because you have the ability to freeze it immediately. And you have all these protections in place and you're not responsible for anything. And the algorithms, machine learning, AI, whatever, have gotten better at detecting that fraud and automatically turning off the cards. So that's an area where self-policing, but kind of in their own self-interest, they've successfully extended that to making it sexy for the end user, and the end users choosing to use that because of the extra security benefits. whereas some other industries, not so much. In banking, wire fraud, business email compromise, massive issue. And Jack, I imagine you and the firm work on a ton of these.
Yep.
The issue there, the bank isn't out the money. It's the account holder that's on the hook. So sure, the bank's trying to help, but from their perspective, it's not their $1 billion or whatever that's been transferred.
90% of conversations about technology involve what I'm about to say next. What about cryptocurrency? Like, has that changed?
We can't go an episode without it.
Yeah, I've heard about this thing called crypto. What has that changed the work you do at Sylint Group? How are you guys getting involved in this sort of either the crypto world or the blockchain world? Where's your point of access for that?
It has three areas, I would say. One area is crypto mining. And certainly anytime you provide the opportunity to make money by using a computer, one of the most expensive parts about crypto mining is power. So we see a lot of threat actors or insider threats, people at companies, installing mining tools on somebody else's computers. Because if I don't have to pay for the power, then I make money. If I have to pay for the power,
up in just north of us. That was one of the public sector. They got their electrical bill one month and like, hey, what is this? And it turns out somebody, you look at the usage and gee, our power seems to be going up between 5 in and 6 in. What's going on there? Yeah. And they had some enterprising young employee had set up their crypto mine on the company, on the organizational servers.
So we see, same note, we see threat actors going after people's Amazon AWS instances. Had a university actually that got hit that had a massive compute array set up for DNA sequencing. And the threat actors got in there and just cranked this thing all the way up to mine Monero. And no one noticed it until one of the researchers said, hey, why is my DNA modeling taking so long? And they went in and figured out that it was because the machine was busy doing math for Monero mining.
Because this supercomputer is using 80% of its resources.
That sets us back. That sets us back from having shark-human hybrids like 6 months, Ernie.
Right. That's right. Exactly. I mean, we would. This is flying cars. This is why we would have been. This is why what's keeping us back from all this stuff.
So we got that one. We also have, obviously easier to move money. So, it's anonymized and I can move money around the world. So we have that issue and certainly tracking those things. Government's trying to get better at it. We're always doing some work in it, but that's an area. And then also with cryptocurrency, unfortunately, it's made it a lot easier for people, investors to lose money, because they lose access to their wallets or their cryptocurrency wallets are hacked. So we just see a lot of cases around either that or how do I secure it? And how do I try to keep this stuff safe? Because now my money isn't sitting in a bank somewhere that's FDIC insured or is in property or whatever. It's transportable. And if somebody else has my password, then they can access my billions of cryptocurrency. And the last one for that, the cryptocurrency, the interesting one, Colonial Pipeline, I use that as an example, where they paid $4 million in ransom. And the FBI, for whatever reason, decided that they were going to use that as an example of their skill or breadth of reach. And they pulled it back out of the cryptocurrency wallets and gave it back to Colonial Pipeline. In the meantime, though, the cryptocurrency had lost half its value. So they paid $4 and got back $2 million, mostly because the cryptocurrency had devalued in that time frame. So that's the other piece that we see a bit of is those questions of investment and movement and growth and the value. So when a threat actor says, hey, you owe me 4 Bitcoin, it's always, is that $4 million or 4 Bitcoin, or what do you want so that we can settle on this transaction in fee?
I'm going to pick the smallest number of those and just say that that's what it is. And then at the end, be surprised when you say it's something different. Oh, 4 million Bitcoin. That's not even a real number. All right, Serge, we talked about some nation state actors. Can you give some examples of how nation states are weaponizing data privacy?
Sure. We talked a little bit about data collection and just pulling all this data together, putting it into a machine learning engine, indexing it. Again, China is a great example there, where they're putting this social your social ranking, and if you are caught on camera jaywalking or not picking up after your dog or whatever, then you may not be able to buy a train ticket out of your area because your social rank is going down because you're not a responsible citizen. But even more interesting than that is some things that we would say here in the US. I would trust that Google is not going to necessarily give my data or give access to my mailbox to China if they just happen to request it. They're going to say, well, wait a minute, no, that's a legal request. Go file your claim or file your request in US court. And if the Supreme Court ultimately decides that they need access to the data, then I'll have to give it to them. But I'm not going to do that just because the government asked. But that's not the same with some Chinese or Russian or Iranian or whatever agencies. The requirement there to comply with government requests is a lot narrower, or a lot more enforced, a lot stronger. So when we have data localization requirements, and when Russia says Twitter has to keep all of the information about Russian Twitter accounts in Russia, well, that may not be because they want to keep it safe out of US intelligence agency hands or something. It's probably because they want to be able to walk into that office and say, you're sitting in Russia, we'll use some rubber hose decryption if you don't want to give us that key, and get access to the data so that we can track our activists. So it's that issue. Interestingly, China, Hong Kong Data Privacy Commission just passed a law this time last year saying that they believe in data privacy, and it's so important to them that if the Data Privacy Authority makes a request for information to protect people to any company in the world, and that request is not honored, then the local Hong Kong employees at that company may be subject to arrest to enforce that request. Anywhere else in the world, that sounds like blackmail or extortion or something like that.
All right. After a short break here, we're going to return with Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. Please stay with us.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
All right, welcome back. All right, Serge, as you probably know, because of your brushes with work with the national security apparatus, you've probably heard of something called a lifestyle polygraph. And a lifestyle polygraph is an intensive question session in order to determine a person's eligibility and suitability for access to some of the nation's most closely guarded secrets. However, here on No Password Required, we subject our guests to a similar invasive, uncomfortable, and oftentimes mentally painful series of questions to probe the inner mind to determine who you are as a person. So that said, are you ready for No Passwords Required's lifestyle polygraph?
Sure, let's go.
Okay. All right. So it's a series of 5 questions. 5 questions. And we're going to start with number one question. All right, here it is. How did being curious manifest itself when you were a kid?
And definitely taking everything apart and sometimes having to rely on Dad to help put it back together again, because I forgot to track the pieces as I was pulling it apart. But probably just being investigative as well, looking at everything with an eye of curiosity and how does that work? What else can I do with that thing? Not being limited to using a box as a box. One of my first cool toys that I can remember was just a big box that parents had painted to represent a cable car, and great times in that. And I like to think that that's probably what started that curiosity. And as a kid, certainly exploring as well, and sailing from a young age, just getting in boats and going places that probably a good thing that I managed to come home safe, but it was just being a lot of exploring and investigating.
Here it is. Ready for this? What was your favorite toy as a kid? And it can't be the cable car, the cable car simulator.
Oh, great, thanks. Probably a metal tractor with a backhoe that I just love playing with and digging in the backyard, and then dragging back up flights of stairs to put it away again. But
was this an all metal toy, or did this have lots of plastic in it?
No, it was all metal, which probably starts to put a time frame and date me a little bit. But all metal, heavy as heck for
one of those Tonka trucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and now I remember those were cool because it had you could manipulate the actual backhoe. It was hinged and articulated in the same way that it acted like a real one. So it was cool to have one of those.
And my parents claimed that they could hear me coming up the stairs because I would just do on clunk, clunk, clunk as it's coming up the stairs behind.
Serge, do you remember the first computer keyboard that you put your fingers on? Do you remember the first time you sat in front of a terminal with a blinking cursor and got to do stuff on it?
That was a TI 95, maybe. What we would think is a calculator.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The magnetic strip reader at the top of it. And you could run the magnetic strips through and code them and play games on them. So it was, and then beyond that, it's everything else that we've seen.
Best computer in the world.
Yeah, but it sometimes defines relationships with computers going forward. But some of those calculators, then it became graphing calculators, and you could program in some of those too. And, little games people had that they traded on them. I think a lot of people learned on those, which is kind of cool.
All right, here we go. Number 3. When you have spare time, do you search out activities that involve problem solving?
Yes. And some of those are very much in my face. I would say, being married and bringing up kids is certainly problem solving enough, but certainly sailing is great for that, and some of my my non-computer activities. But I think it's a source of irritation sometimes for people around me that cybersecurity and this field is so interesting and fascinating that sometimes that when I have spare time, the problem solving is, okay, we have this new attack vector, we have this new attack technique. How are we going to develop a defense against it? Or let's sit down and figure out what is coming next and what some upcoming attack vectors might be. So even that problem solving in spare time tends to be just so much fun and such a challenge.
Sure. Just kind of coming off that, I've always just wondered this. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask this question. With all that and all the intelligence that you gather on a real-time basis and all the profits you see the bad guys making, how do you stay on the good guy side? Aren't you ever tempted, pull a Lex Luthor?
No.
Okay.
It's more frustrating than anything else, but never had any temptation that way.
Okay, that's good.
Are you referring to Superman 3? Was that the Lex Luthor one? That was the one with Richard Pryor in it, I think.
Using the skills for good.
That's right.
It's true. You can sleep well at night. Yeah, that's the thing. You can sleep well at night.
Okay, here we go. Oh, this is a good one. Here we go. What is your go-to meal when you're pulling long hours at the office? What is your go-to meal?
It's got to be coffee and cold pizza.
Coffee and cold pizza. And I'm going to go, and we got to, what type of pizza? You say deep dish and you may get struck by lightning. You know, I'm just saying.
I would say long hours in the office. I would say either whatever's open or whatever in the refrigerator.
I like it.
So
Okay, available. That's
you can't get picky. It's just
I was watching TV a couple days ago with my son, and it was a commercial. He's 11 years old. There's a commercial on for deep dish pizza. And I guess he had never heard of deep dish pizza, or we hadn't had a conversation about it. And he's like trying to sell me. He's like, "Hey, see that pizza there? Looks pretty good. That deep dish pizza looks pretty good." So we have to get deep dish pizza this weekend. But it's like, could you imagine there was a time when as a child, all of us didn't know what deep dish pizza was, and then you learn about it, and then there's no going back from learning.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And then of course, you have the potential of it being, a civil war, families destroyed between deep dish, New York style. It just, these are the thorny issues that we deal with here in the 21st century. What type of pizza? Brother against brother.
I like it, Serge, too, that you're not picking like a handful of, quinoa seeds and an organic fruit juice. Like you're kind of old school. Like, I'm gonna take pizza and the worst coffee you have.
That's right. Is this coffee fresh? No, I'll take it then.
If I were to put a flower in this coffee right now, the flower would die immediately. That's the kind of coffee I like.
Okay, we're going to go on to number 5. Here it is. Lifestyle Polygraph. Number 5. Can you talk more about your more than a decade of experience coaching sailing at the Paralympic Games?
Doing your homework. So I, as I was going through school, was looking for something else to do, and was getting involved more and more in sailing, and was approached by one of the Paralympic sailing teams. So Paralympic sailing for people with physical disabilities. So amputees, paraplegics, quadriplegics, and I ended up coaching the 1996 Paralympic Games in Atlanta, and then again in Sydney, and then again in Greece, and ended up running the International Federation for the games in China. Certainly learned a lot, traveling around the world for that, and meeting a lot of people outside of their normal roles. So meeting with kings and queens and ministers of defense, and amazing how many people sail for recreation. So I had some really great conversations, and managed to sneak in some cybersecurity discussions and other conversations as we were out on the race course. But certainly incredibly rewarding, and just so much fun working, again, solving problem stuff and being curious. Because if you've got somebody that you're sailing with, or you're coaching sailing, and they can't move their legs, or they can, their entire way of moving the boat is sipping and puffing through a straw, then the engineering that has to go into solving those problems is very similar to some of the solutions and problems that come up with in the digital world, but it kept it very real. One of my favorite stories from that, and it's just something that still reminds me today to be a little empathetic and really try to put yourself into the victim's shoes and into the other person's position, was we spent months developing a spinnaker pole that could be launched off the front of one of the sailboats, and could be launched from the cockpit. Because if you're paraplegic, quadriplegic, you can't get out of the cockpit of the boat to go up on the foredeck to launch the spinnaker. And so we would spend all this time developing it, testing it, shove the boat off the dock, go sailing for the day, come back, and the entire crew is just saying, this is the worst thing ever. How does this work? And I'm looking at it going, it works great. And they're saying, okay, if you think it's so great, come over here and use it. Jump on the boat, pull the lines. The pole launches flawlessly. Everything works great. And I look at them and say, what's wrong with that? And they said, sit down. And I sat down and nothing worked, because we had done everything as if I'm standing in the cockpit, and they can't stand. And as soon as you sit down, it just changed the angle on everything and nothing worked. So we brought it back to the design room and started re-architecting everything. But it really just always reminds me to make sure that you're looking at things from that other perspective. And I think that was one of the big takeaways from my experience in coaching, was really making sure that when we're looking at a solution, when we're trying to put something together, cyber, life, whatever, we've got to make sure that we're looking at it from all sides.
Well, I tell you, that's, that right there, that's the top shelf answer that I think we've heard. So Serge, thank you very much, for spending some time with us today and joining us. If our listeners would like to connect with you, how would they do that?
Ernie, thanks very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And certainly great show, great team that you've got here. So thanks a lot. Certainly anytime, welcome to send me an email, sjorgensen@sylint.com, and reach out, LinkedIn, also Sylint, and certainly website. One thing, Sylint, that Sylint, it's funny, I've gotten to the point where I can't spell Sylint correctly anymore, because every time I see it, it looks like it's spelled wrong. But we came up with that name with the SYL is a collection of, and it's Greek and Latin for pulling together, and then INT for intelligence, like the military, they have human, intelligent, and comment. So SYL, INT for us is really that collection of intelligence. So happy to talk. Anyone wants to reach out, certainly happy to dive into cybersecurity with them.
That's excellent. And so folks, stick around, because coming up next is Technologue with Pablo Torres.
If you want to stay on top in cybersecurity, you have to learn something new every day. It's time to get educated. Welcome to Technologue, Game Show Edition.
Welcome to Technologue, Game Show Edition. I'm your host, Pablo Torres. On today's segment, we will pull the veil back on the world's largest and most notable hacking convention, DEF CON. This fusion of the world's most prominent security researchers is held annually in Las Vegas. DEF CON was founded by then 18-year-old Jeff Moss as a farewell party for his friend, a fellow hacker and member of PlatinumNet. A hackers conference held in a Vegas casino definitely brings in odd optics. The best comparison that I can make, and I had to look this one up, it's like driving Miss Daisy meets the Matrix. Who would have ever imagined? So prepare yourselves, prepare your noggin, prepare that intuitive judgment, and let's get ready to do some high-speed cybersecurity, cyber culture assessments. Let's get started. On today's panel, we have Mr. Jack Clabby, Mr. Ernie Ferraresso. We have our sound engineer, Devin Matlis, and lo and behold, Serena, the woman behind all of this, Miss Serena Gandhi. All right, question 1. This is gonna be a hard one, fastball. What year did DEF CON founder Jeff Moss host the first hacker meetup in Las Vegas? Serena, we'll start with you.
My guess is 1980.
All right. Mr. Clabby?
We'll go with 1998.
Okay. Ernie?
I'm going to go 96.
Oh, wow. Devin, what do you believe?
I'm thinking 92.
Devin, yeah, you're taking that one away. Second closest was Serena, third closest was Jack. The answer is 1993.
Oh, cool.
What?
On point.
Jeez.
Oh, yeah. Let's go, Devin.
Man, out of nowhere.
Point, Devin.
That's
I know.
beginner's luck, first timer's luck.
Hey, he's a sleeper. He's in there. So, fun fact:
That's how it
the
works.
term DEF CON comes from the movie War Games, and it's referencing the U.S. Armed Forces Defense Readiness Condition, also known as DEF CON. In the movie, Las Vegas was selected as a nuclear target, and since the event was being hosted in Las Vegas, it occurred to Jeff Moss to name the convention DEF CON. Question number 2, and we'll start off with Mr. Clabby. What is the top recorded attendance outcome for a DEF CON meetup in its history?
40,000.
Ooh. That's good, man.
Ernie?
People, 40,000 people.
40, yeah.
Top recorded.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I'm going to go 30,000. I'm going to go just underneath there. That gives us a 10K buffer there, Jack. So I'm not running all over you.
Serena?
All right, I'm gonna go bigger. I'm gonna say 50,000.
Oh,
That's a lot of hackers. Wow.
well, it is
Devin.
Las Vegas,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking around 30,000 too.
Well, damn, Devin. Okay, Ernie, Devin, you guys are gonna have to split that point because the answer is 30,000.
Good job, Ernie.
that's right, my
job.
friend. That's what I like to hear. Right. It's 0.5 apiece. I
Those
like
other
it.
those other 10,000 that I was thinking of, they just got their way in without having to pay. So
That,
they're
that's
classic hacker.
Classic hacker.
So,
I know.
well, I'm not going to protest it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna
Oh, you,
protest.
you only meant legitimate, paying customers. Oh,
No.
well, yeah, in that case.
Classic.
My goodness.
Couple
Still
egg,
human.
couple eggheads here.
That's
going
right.
the ticket take.
It's like, who let those guys in? This top count was in 2019, and this was for DEF CON 27, where we had 30,000, let's call them security researchers, go out and mingle to just network within the
Is
community.
that the polite term? Is that because every time I say nobody calls them hackers anymore, man, and that's of course that's how younger people talk to me, man. Nobody
Man.
calls them hackers, man.
Hey, listen, Grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, old man.
Listen, Linda. It's security researchers is appropriate. If we wanted to talk about a technical approach, we would say DevSecOps engineers.
That's a cool one. That's a good one. I like that. DevSecOps engineer. Okay.
Yeah, they get creative and they like to tinker, and I'm right there with them. But I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I'm looking for those who are tinkering. Question number 3. How many hackers attended the first DEF CON back in 1993? Devin, let's start off with you, sir.
I'm gonna go with a low number. 60?
Okay. 60 is his answer. Ernie, what do you believe?
5.
5.
I'm going with 5.
That's a real low number.
That's right. I think that's many in those early 90s. There wasn't many of those guys running around. That's what that was. And they didn't have money back then, too. So it's not like they're going to Vegas and living it up. They're like,
They were using clamshells back then. I
That's
think,
right.
was how that worked. It was Atari. It was
They were trading Nintendo
units of
cartridges.
Atari. It was,
That's right.
I'm going to go with 100 people.
Serena.
I'm gonna guess 90.
All right. Well, Sally was surely selling seashells by the DEF CON shore because only 100 people got in.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
There it is. Good job, Jack.
All right.
Very good job. Serena, you were right there. In year 2, those numbers more than doubled. And very interesting to note, our friend Win Charteau wrote a semi-fictionalized account of DEF CON 2, and he called it Cyber Christ meets Lady Luck. That man's full of surprises.
That he is. That he is. I mean, yeah, we'll have to get Win back around to have him to talk a little bit about that adventure.
That's
Win-
awesome. I'm going to look
Yeah.
that is, I got to look
Yeah.
that. I got to find that document.
Check it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely win for a round 2. Yeah, it's definitely BA. Yeah.
Well, because you got to talk. I just got to think. Back then, That's when, there was no, Silicon Valley, nerd billionaires and all that. This was still, if you were in computers and you were still classified as nerd and not, and that wasn't a good thing. That was, you were just barely coming out of the 80s when nerds were pariahs.
Well, you had to buy in '94. You had to buy a plane ticket over the phone. I mean, we weren't. I don't know if there was even the internet for buying a plane ticket. I mean, you want to go to Las Vegas, you got to plan. It's not like, oh, let's see what Southwest has and hop on a plane.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen. Question number 4. This is a fun one. How much prize money was awarded to the team that won the 2021 DEF CON Hack-A-Sat competition?
So before you answer that, the Hack-A-Sat competition is where they hacked into the Air Force's satellite. So that was the challenge. So to give you a little background on that. All right, back to you, Pablo.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Rex. Yep, we're hacking into satellites, and there was a team out there, I'm not going to say who yet, that was successful in making sure that the objective came to fruition.
I'm going to say prize was 6 Bitcoin.
Oh, Bitcoin at today's price or Bitcoin at all-time highs?
I will say $60,000.
Ernie, you're next, sir.
Here you go. This is a bold one. I'm going to get in close. $0. 0. They won no money.
Twist question. All right.
Sir, what? You just created this sliding scale from $0 all the way up to 6 BTC. So how are we going to eat? Come on. I'm leaning more towards the Carlton Field CFT 2023.
Listen, to quote one of our greatest Americans, you will receive no money, but on your deathbed, you will gain total consciousness. So I got that going for me. There's that.
Devin, what do you think?
I'm gonna go with a standard prize for 10,000.
Okay. Giving us some credit here. Thank you, Devin. Miss Serena, what do you think?
I'm gonna say 25,000.
Okay, Serena knows that inflation is hitting, so I mean, okay. The answer is $50,000.
$50K! Wow!
Nice.
Nobody believed in it. Nobody believed in it.
Serena, winner, chicken dinner.
Woo-hoo.
Great job.
Wait, I wasn't close.
That's got to be Clabby.
Whoa.
I thought I was $60,000.
Yeah, he's 60. Serena was 25.
But Clabby said 6 Bitcoins at all-time highs for $360,000.
Oh.
No, he said current rate.
I thought I just said 60,000. Oh, no worries, Serena, take the point.
Back off, Bobby.
I'm
She's gonna fight you for it, man.
No, if I couldn't make myself clear as a professional communicator, I don't deserve
As
a point.
Serena, as a judge, I'm giving a point to both.
Yeah,
nice.
I'll deal with that.
Hey,
Then we had to go to the judges.
I'm still fired up about this Carlton Fields Capture the Flag 2023. So
you heard it here first.
Can't even imagine what the paperwork would be like to achieve that.
That would be scary. Fun fact about the $50,000 grand prize: over 1,000 teams participated in a qualification event. The 8 highest scoring teams moved on to the final satellite hacking competition, of which the team Solar Wine, as in the cork, the wine cork, a team of individuals from Belgium, France, Switzerland, and Martus. I butchered that one. Martus.
Yeah.
Martus.
Yeah.
Yeah. They won the competition. Highly diverse, very dynamic team of some brilliant minds that got into some satellites. And I'm jealous because I aspired to work for Starlink and to do satellite enterprise security.
And they did. I think one of the things they did was they were able to get the satellite to turn around or turn the camera around and take a picture of the moon instead of the constant picture of the Earth because it was facing the Earth. That's one of the things they were able to manipulate it to do.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
That's
cool.
epic.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really
Did they
cool.
clear this with NASA, or they clear with the private, whoever
It was
is operating?
It was the
all
Air
cleared.
Force and some other, it was
Air
another
Force,
government
yeah.
agency that was involved in it. But yeah, it was a whole sanctioned deal. Yeah,
Okay.
they were involved, and it was really, I think it was DOD. I wouldn't think it was DOD,
Okay.
DoD.
Air Force, and they were both really happy with the result from what I read. They got a lot more inquiries based on that. So pretty cool.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, very cool. You got to think about it. I mean, from a DoD perspective, I mean, you have Homeland Security, and then from Homeland Security, you have CISA. So when it comes to critical infrastructure, satellites themselves are something that are highly sought after. If you can disrupt communication satellite-wise, I mean, what happens down on the Earth? But that's a whole nother rabbit hole and string to pull on. But yeah, DoD, HSI, CISA.
Wow.
Air Force, of course. Air Force drove the project. Question number 5. Chris Kubeka, the founder and CEO of HIPAASEC, is the 2022 DEF CON keynote speaker. How many Twitter followers do you think she has? Devin, I'm curious to hear your answer.
Let's go with 1 million.
Oh. Serena?
I'm gonna say 57,000.
All right. Mr. Ernie?
563,202.
Man, all of you guys need to get into the social media game and start helping build some brands. Mr. Jack?
I'm going to go with the equivalent of 6 Bitcoins.
Well played. Well played,
No,
sir.
I'm going to say, everyone, I want to make my guess quite clear. It is going to be 115,000. 115,000.
Oh, man, all I'm thinking about is Bitcoin, and we're talking about Twitter followers.
This is how you got to be able to think when you're on this show. You got to be able to make all those connections. Just
I
runs all
know.
together.
I'm being pulled in so many different directions in my mind right now. The answer, 23,032 followers.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yes.
Serena with the win. With the point.
Serena has that intuition. Fun fact about Chris. So Chris Kubeka is an American computer security researcher and a cyber warfare specialist. In 2012, she was responsible for getting the Saudi Aramco network back up and running after it was hit by one of the world's most devastating cyber attacks, Shamoon. Just a little background on that cyber attack itself. I think it's important to note that the damage that it caused, it was severely extensive. I mean, the kingdom's oil giant found itself hit by the so-called Shamoon computer virus, which deleted hard drives, and it displayed a picture of a burning American flags. And that attack forced Aramco to shut down its network and destroy over 30,000 computers. So think about, I mean, for them, maybe the operational expenditure and capital expenditure was nominal, but still that would destroy other enterprises.
Yeah, I want to say that was the thing. It was one of the first incidents where it was actually like causing physical damage and destruction to the actual system. So it was a pretty big deal.
That concludes our Technologue Game Show edition.
And that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for joining us. First and foremost, I have to thank my co-hosts, Jack Clabby and Pablo Torres. And also a special thanks to our guest, Serge Jorgensen. He's out there on the helm of our ships, helping us sail through the cyber ocean and reminding us that it's important to take other people's perspective as we're going forward. So now, just remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod, and send your questions or comments to info@nopasswordpodcast.com. And if you'd like some show swag, just ask and we'll hook you up. I'm Ernie Ferreso. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Second Watch. If you would like to learn more about the show, visit our website at cyberflorida.org/pod. And if you still need more show content, check out our social media at No Password Pod.